Excellent. We'll wait another minute or two until give people a chance to come in, and then we'll begin. Just another minute. Okay, I think we can begin. So welcome everyone. This is Birds of a Feather session at the RDA Plenary 24th on metadata for reproducibility. My name is Limor Pierre. I am based at Yale University, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Reproducibility Interest Group. And I'm here along with my co-chairs, as well as the Metadata Interest Group co-chairs, and we'll be having a conversation today about this topic. I want to remind everyone the session is recorded. If you prefer not to go on camera, please keep your video off. I also want to remind everyone we have collaborative notes. Those are meant to both give you a chance to record your attendance here and indicate your interest, as well as for us to all collaborate as a community on some of what's being said in the session, and have a record in addition to the video record of some of what was going on and what is said, and also a place where you can put in questions. I want to remind everyone we have a chat going on as well, so please feel free to use the Zoom chat to drop in questions or comments, and we'll have plenty of opportunities throughout the session also to pause for discussion. So I'll go through the agenda in just a little bit. I want to just give a very brief background on why we're here for this Birds of a Feather. You'll notice that we have links on the slide to the metadata interest group and the reproducibility interest group. We'll give a brief explanation or a description of each in a moment. But really, this came about because of a recognition of the mature work on metadata at RDA. The group has been around for a while and has done some fantastic work on metadata. And along with that, we've heard at the reproducibility interest group meetings some interest expressed in metadata for reproducibility. What is it? Is it different than other kind of metadata? What should it be? Is it important, and why? And so those are the kind of questions that prompted us today to come together and maybe think through some of these topics. So we'll begin here with just welcoming any new members and reminding everyone of the RDA Code of Conduct. If you're not a member of RDA, please join. The agenda for today is that we're going to have a brief introduction of the speakers that we have today. We'll have an overview of the metadata interest group and the reproducibility interest group. Then we will have the opportunity to hear from both groups on a problem statement. And so Lauren and Milan are going to lead that. We're going to talk a little bit about the social aspect and the technical aspect. And we'll pause after that to give you all a chance to talk about that. We'll then have 3 topics that we want to highlight. And we're going to be highlighting machine actionable FDOs, machine actionable DMPs, and the topic of reproducibility verification and how those relate to metadata on reproducibility. So then we'll end with kind of an open discussion and a wrap up and any next steps. So again, please make sure you go on the collaborative notes. Let us know you're here. And we'll begin. So for my colleagues who are speaking today, if you don't mind giving us, unmuting yourself, Claire, maybe you go first and let us know which group you belong to and a little bit about your role.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm a recently new co-chair of the Reproducibility Interest Group. In my day job is I work for the Government of Canada, heading a science enablement unit. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I lead development of an extensive extension of the RDA Machine Actionability Data Management Plan standard. So I'll be presenting on that a bit later. First of all, though, I need to say that all views and opinions expressed are my own, do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of my employer or of any government agency or organization. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Alex, please.
Hello there, I'm Alex Ball, Research Data Librarian at the University of Bath with particular responsibility for the university's Research Data Archive, and I'm a co-chair of the Metadata Interest Group.
Milan.
I'm Milan Oysteršek from University of Maribor, Slovenia, and I'm also co-chair of Metadata Interest Group.
And Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Cadwallader. I am the Open Research Manager at PLOS, the publisher, and I am a co-chair of the Reproducibility Interest Group.
Great. And I also want to give a shout out to Steve Richard, who is a co-chair of the Metadata Group, who's here and monitoring the chat. And hi, Steve. Great to see you. Okay, so we're gonna dive right in. I'm gonna give a brief overview on the Reproducibility Interest Group, and then Alex will take it over and talk a little bit about the Metadata Interest Group. So the history of the Reproducibility Interest Group at RDA is that it's been established a long time ago, kind of with the beginning of RDA back in December of 2014. I think it may have been plenary 5 or something. Someone else might know specifically, but at the time, it had different co-chairs who were focused on infrastructure for reproducibility primarily. And the group went into hiatus after a few plenaries that it was involved in leading. And basically, after some work at RDA that had to do with aspects of reproducibility and curation, a group of us put our heads together and made a pitch to RDA to reinstate the group. And that's what happened in July of 2023. So along with my co-chairs, we wrote the case study, as you do, for RDA, and reestablished the group with a slightly different focus, where we were thinking of the interest group as really a forum for conversation around reproducibility, data and code relating to reproducibility. And we're thinking of the group as being kind of an arena for discussion of various aspects of reproducibility, initiatives around reproducibility, and developments, both within RDA and outside of RDA. So we think that there's a lot of work actually at RDA relating to it, but we are sort of a cross group facilitator where we can have more conversations, more structured conversations, and also having the ability to bring about some deliverables based on the interest of the membership, of the group membership. So those are the general objectives. We've met for a Birds of Feather session back in March of 23. What's next for RDA on computational reproducibility? We had long conversations on what computational reproducibility is and what it should be. We're going along with the common definition now of reproducibility, which I think everyone is aware of, which is basically using the same data, the same code for the same results. Obviously, there's differences a little bit across different disciplines, but that is the general gist of what we mean by reproducibility. At that BoF, there was a lot of interest in reinstating the group, and that's what we did right after. In October, we introduced the reestablished interest group. We talked with some members of RDA who are leading other groups to kind of start to flesh out these connections between what people are doing. We talked with fair sharing group. We talked with metadata group. We talked with research assessment. There's a lot of parallels and a lot of points of connection. We skipped P22 and had an asynchronous conversation where we reached out to the community at large who was dealing with reproducibility in any aspect: publishers, funders, societies, researchers, of course, various groups who are dealing with different aspects, and asked them a series of 4 questions so that we can start building kind of a database in a way, or a base of knowledge on what is going on in this space. We presented some of that in P23 and continued to narrow the focus on what our group is really interested in. Metadata for reproducibility, as I mentioned, was one of those topics of interest. So just really briefly, we're currently working on mapping what we're calling the reproducibility landscape, again, both at RDA and outside RDA. We're hoping to release our first version to the community for review very shortly. And that will be a living document that'll have the ability for groups to update their information, to new groups to add their information, and so forth. And so we'll have a lot more information on that. I won't go into it now, but please join the reproducibility interest group so that you can receive the post, and we'll let you know much more about that. Just one final thing. We are also in the process of launching a reproducibility checklist working group that will have very specific deliverables within the 18-month period of time. Thank you very much to RDA Tiger for supporting the effort, and again, you'll hear much more about that in the coming weeks. So that's basically the RDA interest group, and I will hand it over to Alex to let us know about the metadata interest group.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you can believe it, the metadata interest group is even slightly older than the reproducibility interest group. We were established in May 2013, and our first session was in the second plenary, which was the one in Munich. I say we, I didn't join as a co-chair until a few years after that. I think the biggest change recently has been at the end of 2023, when the founding co-chairs, Keith Jeffrey and Rebecca Koskela, moved on from the group. And that's when Milan and Steve came on board. And I mentioned this for 2 reasons. Firstly, that there is still space for more co-chairs. So you may have noticed a slight white male bias in our perspectives. So if anyone would like to join us and broaden our perspective, that will be most welcome. But the other reason for mentioning it is the change of lineup has given us an opportunity to look again at our case statement and to think about what we want the metadata interest group to evolve into in the coming years. But I think that the things that we are keen to remain as our primary focus is to provide a forum where people from multiple different disciplines and regions can come together to discuss matters of interest regarding the metadata used to describe research data, to identify data management challenges that can be addressed by the proper use of metadata, and to promote solutions that do exactly that, use the metadata to address these problems and challenges. And lastly, to develop recommendations for how people can improve the quality and interoperability of the of their metadata, so that the data that they're describing can be as findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable as possible. So over the years, we've developed and are continue to develop several resources. So we've produced a document, the RDA metadata principles and their use, which was developed in collaboration with some of the other metadata related groups within RDA. And if you haven't read it, I do recommend you take a look. It does give a good summary and overview of some of the best practices around metadata, and helps clear up some points of confusion and misunderstanding that people sometimes have about metadata and using metadata in their research workflows. Another piece of ongoing work is our recommended metadata element set. And there are two aims behind this, really. The metadata element set is trying to identify the most important elements of metadata that are common in the metadata standards that have been developed. But it's also intended to act as a bridge between metadata standards. The idea being that if you can express any given metadata standard in terms of the recommended metadata element set, then it becomes a much simpler job to be able to migrate metadata from one standard to another, if you can use the metadata element set as the kind of intermediate step to go from one to the other. And last one to mention is the metadata standards catalog, which is the latest incarnation of a resource that was originally developed by the UK Digital Curation Centre. It's a community maintained resource, which means that everybody in RDA is invited to contribute to it in order to ensure that it remains comprehensive and up to date. But the particular value of it for us is a platform for being able to develop additional tools. So, for example, if and when we do actually manage to get the metadata element set into a point where it is able to be able to convert metadata from one standard to another, the utility for doing that will be built on top of the metadata standards catalog. So I think that's everything that I wanted to say about the metadata interest group. So I will now hand over to Lauren to begin talking about the first of our problem statements.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so I wanted to tackle one of the problems that we see with kind of metadata for reproducibility, and that's, I guess, around the kind of social element. So what I think of as kind of people and their behaviors, and why they're not necessarily how we would like them to be. So this is just some snippets from some research that I've been doing at PLOS. And really one of the problems we see is that researchers don't necessarily see the need for sharing in a reproducible way. So if we look at the amount of research that's sharing just code that is needed for kind of reproducing the results of an article, we see a high of 42% at PLOS. And actually, if you look more broadly in the literature, and this is, in the kind of life sciences, medical sciences kind of area predominantly, you see even less, around 26% in kind of comparators. And that's really low. And given that PLOS is an open science publisher, we are doing better than others, but it's still pretty poor. We've also done some research around asking people why they might be interested in looking at someone else's code. So thinking about not just the authors, but researchers as readers of research. And actually only, they could pick multiple options about why they're interested in looking at code. And actually only a fifth were kind of interested in looking at it for a kind of reproducibility point of view. So kind of thinking about research quality and could they trust it? Is it verifiable? Many more people are interested in looking at code to aid the understanding of the research they're looking at. So looking at the parameters set, for example. About half of them actually want to reuse it, but often it's reusing snippets of code. So things like, I really like the way that they presented their figures, so I'd like to reuse that kind of code or reuse parts of it or reuse it in teaching, for example. And then the kind of graph in the bottom right, we asked researchers about actually what's the best way, in your opinion, that others can share their code? What makes code really useful? What kind of platform? And overwhelmingly, researchers like accessing other people's code in a code repository, so something like GitHub or Bitbucket. And of course, that presents another challenge that something like GitHub is used by a community that's far wider than academia. And so they all have different needs. And so when we're thinking about metadata, it's difficult to impose I guess the requirements or desires of kind of the academic community on a repository like GitHub. So there are all these kind of issues and barriers around, people don't necessarily see that they need to share it in a reproducible way. And then one of the other things that we've asked in the course of this research is how well do you share your code and how well do other people share their code? And researchers always go, oh, I'm brilliant at sharing my code. I don't have any problems. And they go, oh, but other people, yeah, they're not so good, which, always makes me laugh. And then if you go to the next slide, Limor, there's some research from Samuel Meacham came out last year in GigaScience, and they actually tried to reproduce almost 22 or just over 22,000 Jupyter notebooks that were written in Python. And they found like that tiny fraction, that little blue bar at the top, were actually reproducible. And lots of them weren't for a variety of reasons. Some, didn't have enough documentation to even start trying to reproduce them. Some declared dependencies but wouldn't run. Others gave errors. Others gave different results. So actually, even we can see that even when people try perhaps to be reproducible, even though they think that they can do it and they're not necessarily going to come up against lots of problems, that actually it's really hard for others to reproduce that work. So not only do we have this kind of demand and supply kind of problem perhaps, but in terms of people who are willing to share their work in this way, but we also have that kind of missing skills gap as well. And speaking from a publisher perspective, all these kind of barriers or kind of low adoption rates then make it difficult for someone like a publisher to say you must share it reproducibly, because actually that just creates a huge barrier for people to overcome, and really we wouldn't be kind of serving the needs of researchers in a kind of great way if we suddenly imposed loads of things that they couldn't meet because there is kind of a lack of skills or knowledge in how to do that. And I'm going to pass over to Milan at this point, who's going to talk, I guess, more on those kind of skills and knowledge and technical sides. Just as a reminder, Milan, you've got about 10 minutes to keep us on track.
What is the main problem in from technical side? We need additional technical expertise and additional metadata for description of software and code, data provenance and processing. Also, metadata about experimental protocols and methods, computational environment and contextual information. And this is a question for you how to achieve robust data management practice, standardized metadata schemas for description of reproducible research, and improve software development practice within the research community. This is not so easy because we have different professions and our, how I say, knowledge of researchers are much more different, and it is not so simple to breach this barrier. Maybe we'll go next slide. What are main technical challenges? First thing is lack of proper version control and also dependencies on specific library versions which may become unavailable or incompatible over time. Also, how to recreate exact software environment, operating system, libraries, dependencies. Also, we have conflicts between different software versions. Also, code may be not properly documented. Also, problem is with proprietary software or libraries with limitation of accessibility of this. Also, data is maybe unavailable due to privacy restrictions, licenses issues. Also, problem is with big data, with large data sets, which is difficult to share and store, especially if you have processing on HPC environment and you need to transfer this big data from one HPC to another HPC. Also important is tracking of origin and processing steps of data. Also, we don't have in a lot of cases data transformation scripts and cleaning procedures. And these procedures may be not good documented. Also, problem is with undocumented data format. Also, changes of data formats. It's problem, and if you have an older data set, it's not possible to use these data sets because newer software don't have possibilities to import this data. Also, problem is with data repositories. Maybe are unavailable after some time, and it's not possible to download data. Also, problem is different computational environment. For example, if we have different hardware specification, different CPU, GPU configuration, RAM, also cloud computing environment is in some cases is problem. Also, workflows which are not documented, and maybe some workflows are not automated. Also, some algorithms use some random seeds, and you need carefully to recording these random seeds. And also metadata schemas. We have problems with standardized metadata schema, and also we have incomplete and inconsistent metadata, and it is problem to understand and reuse this data, and also insufficient documentation of code. Our documentation is outdated. Also, researchers may lack the necessary technical skills to properly document and share data, and reproducibility often requires expertise in software engineering, data management, and computational method, and we have some gaps on this area. Please, if we go to the next slide. Additional metadata, which we need are for software and code for data provenance and processing, experimental protocol and methodology, computational environment, contextual information. Please, if we go to the next slide, I will explain a little bit. For software and code, we need metadata about version control, software dependencies, execution environment, code documentation, and also licensing. Maybe on next slide. The same is in data. Important is that raw data is also accessible, not this clean data, because if you have raw data, it is possible to see if someone clean some outliers which are important. For example, it is not for it is maybe data fabrication or data amputation or data importation because of this. And important are data processing scripts, also data versions. We need to track data modifications. For example, data quality information is important, and also important is description of variables and their units. Maybe next slide. Also about experimental protocol. We need information about the step-by-step description of the experimental procedure, also information about materials, equipment, and settings, also information about calibration of instruments and validation, also about statistical methods used, etc., and other things. Maybe we will go next slide. Also computational environment. If we have defined this computational environment, then it's possible to use and retry the same experiment. Maybe on next slide. And also some contextual information are important, especially I think ethical information about ethical approvals and informed consents, also clear identification of contributors, and also information about related publications where it's possible to find more information. This is from my side about technical part.
Great, thank you, Milan. We've got about just over 10 minutes now for some kind of community responses to the statement. So I don't know, Limor, should we stop sharing slides so everyone can see each other? Just you know, we'd like to invite people to give us their kind of thoughts based on those problem statements. You know, Milan presented you know, there's a whole raft of things that actually need to be shared for reproducibility, not just the computational side of things that kind of I was talking about. So, you know, one place to start is, you know, which bits do we tackle? Who drives the kind of the change that we need? Is it funders, institutions, infrastructure providers? So yeah, I'm going to pause and see if anyone's got any thoughts. Please feel free to raise your hand or type something in the chat. We'll keep monitoring that as well. Yeah, Hugh, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everybody. So, yeah, I mean, this is there's lots of different directions that this can go. I suppose the first thing is maybe to identify what platform where the need is greatest. So, you know, personal bias, I'd be kind of going, oh yeah, notebooks need to work on them. But that's entirely my bias. It might be, oh yeah, people who are working on workflows. Maybe that's the thing that first people should be doing, and or is it even kind of more basic, like monolithic pieces of code that that somebody's written in some language. Maybe that's the first thing that should be looked at. No, I don't know how to figure out what the priority is. But it seems to me that that's kind of like, you know, a direction to pick here, and you know, and then you kind of go, all right, do that, and then, or, well, start to do that, shall we say, and then actually, then people can say, oh yeah, hang on, yeah, we need to look at it in these directions and kind of build up momentum that way. So yeah, that's my 2 pennies worth there.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. It's an interesting like question, right? Do we tackle the type of code or workflow pipeline first? In which
Yeah.
case it might be across different disciplines.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to tackle it in one particular discipline where there could be multiple ways of sharing or analyzing your data.
Yeah, sorry, I should have sort of said, yeah, there's the disciplinary approach as well. You know, that's the axis, the other axis as well to explore.
Yeah. Thank you. I can see a comment in the chat from Matthew. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak to it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's
The
fine.
time to when I was listening to you. So first, thank you all. It's really interesting, and it's as was previously said by Hugh, it's really dense. A lot of interesting things to dig in. Just when I was listening, I was wondering whether it was not a bigger objective than just focusing on reproducibility, because, well, to me, maybe it's a bit naive, and I know there's a lot of debate about what reproducibility means, and but in my view, it was basically you be using the same code and the same data and achieving the same results, which is already a big thing, as opposed to replicability and so on, which we need for the general stability of the message, but it's kind of different things. And when Milan said, well, we should have metadata, and we should have metadata, but it's not necessarily for reproducibility, about, I don't know, protocols and so on. It relates more to replicability than to reproducibility, but maybe it's just how to phrase the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? There are layers and layers and layers of it, right? And perhaps some of this is about defining some kind of minimum standard, right? Which you can then add things on top of.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something too. It's to me, it's really complicated. What complicates reproducibility is that between different disciplines, we really do have very different views of what it is. Talking to a computer scientist, he will basically say, "I'm an economist," and he will basically say that none of what I do is reproducible. But it's because it doesn't achieve the same level how it's not as demanding depending on which discipline. So it's really hard to have a common standard because different people will have different expectations. That's me.
Yeah, another good point. I think which kind of speaks to what Hugh was saying, right? About perhaps you just take a narrow focus to start with and try and crack it for one set of people.
Another thread that maybe I'd just like to pick up on is we've seen the need for metadata on all of these aspects, and honestly, it's so much that unless it's produced in some automatic way, it's not something that we can ask researchers to sit down and do. So the expectation that every project will have metadata on all of these different aspects, when the incentive for the researchers is just to go ahead and publish and move to the next project, might be a little unrealistic unless we figure out a way to do this in a different way.
Yeah, quite. And I think that goes to kind of partly to Hugh's comment in the chat, right, about having some kind of automatic assessment around whether things are reproducible. It's having humans like create and assess everything is a lot of work.
my opinion is also that because I work with different professions and for example, some domain-specific experts don't have enough knowledge about software engineering, and it is hard to make a bridge between them, because I am, for example, on the other side on I am on development of software, and in a lot of cases we need a lot of negotiations about what they want and how to achieve these things. They are very good experts in their fields, but they haven't enough knowledge, and this bridge between software engineering and domain-specific research is very, very important. And also problem is data management practice and domain-specific metadata schemas for description. Every study has their own metadata schema, and it's not compatible with other study, and so it is hard to be interoperable.
Yes, Stephen, go ahead.
Hi, I'm wondering, to me, one maybe important question we could address is the question of when is it important for code to be reproducible, data to be reproducible, and that really it's not always the case every time you sit down to write a script or something that it's something somebody else might use or might need to use. And really, if people are thinking from the beginning when they sit down to write some code that, okay, this needs to be something that I'm going to publish and needs to be reproducible, if there were guidelines about how to do that. And it strikes me that, one of the reasons that Jupyter notebooks are popular is because I think they were sort of designed with the intention to support making it easier to reproduce things. And if, you sort of push people towards, okay, use one, something like a notebook that's designed to be reproducible, and you need to provide these kinds of things to make sure it works. The bottom line is making code reproducible to the extent that we're talking about requires a lot of work, depending on how complex your code is, but it can be pretty time consuming. And so there has to be a reason to do it. And also, this also gets into the social aspects of why would somebody want, there needs to be a motivation to do it. So provide some kind of decision tree about, does this code need to be reproducible? If so, how do I go about building it so that it is easier to engineer that way? And then from the higher level perspective, what are the benefits to the researcher for doing that? Tangible benefits, in terms of job performance reviews and stuff like that actually count. Anyway, it's.
Thank you. I think that's a really valuable point. Volmar, do you want to go ahead? Oh, I can't hear you. You're unmuted on Zoom.
Another attempt. Is my sound working now? All right.
Yeah, that's
you. I think maybe tying into, so what are the objects we're thinking about? So what the metadata should be focusing on. On the one end, if you were thinking about the container, if you have containerized compute or virtualized runtime environment, then you don't maybe need to include as much metadata as you would need to if you're running something on directly on a hardware. And sometimes the hardware is really important, and then you have tons of different factors that you might need to account for. So I think for the purpose of creating a working group or doing some tangible work, it would probably be important to first decide on, what is the object that we start with. Otherwise, I think an equally interesting discussion might be to look at more on the principles of the things to include, and maybe not exactly how to, or on the details to include. I mean, building on the Cure for Fair activities in the past, and perhaps extend that with some more precise guidelines for each of the steps with regards to metadata to include with the curated package, so to speak. So that's my 10 cents.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Jill. Sorry if I'm getting anyone's names wrong. If you could just keep your comments brief so we can keep to time, that'd be great. Thank you.
So how many minutes do I have? One?
Oh yeah, 1, 2 maybe.
Okay. So then 2 points. One, metadata extraction is great, but the metadata extraction cannot be done out of the blue. Things like what is the license of your software? No metadata extraction automatic tool will be able to get it if you don't provide it. So even though we do need to think about tools that will help researchers creating all the metadata, we still need them to do a bit in this. The second thing is like, yes, reproducibility is difficult. It is related to good practices. Not everybody will have the skills. Let's start with baby steps. This is usually how we approach the subject of FAIR for research software, for instance. Is like you are using GitHub or GitLab, you already are following some good practices without you even realizing about it. You are already using versioning. You don't do releases, it's easy to do, this is the way. You don't do it with Zenodo, then go there and put your releases. Because I know that it is difficult, but if this is the way that we start a conversation, it's difficult and a lot of work. We are just scaring people. If we show them, yes, maybe you are not doing it all, but you are already doing this, maybe you are ready to move to a tiny bit more, it will be easier to reach the community.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think 2 really important points there. I'm going to keep us moving forward in the interest of time. I think hopefully we'll have a bit more time towards the end of the session for some more comments. But now we're going to hear, I think, got on 3 different topics, got about 10 minutes each for us, our speakers, to talk about some different aspects or ways to approach reproducibility. So I think it's Milan first.
I will talk something about fair digital object. What is a digital object? Is a research result in digital form, like scientific paper, like workflow services, software, lab notebooks, etc. And this fair digital object need to comply FAIR principles. And it important is that this fair digital object is possible to find by both humans and machine, and can be accessed by anyone who has permission, regardless of their location or hardware, and can be combined and used with other digital objects, regardless of the format and software, etc. So important is also that this digital object has a type, has a bit of sequences of bits, and also metadata, especially metadata about provenance, access rights, and also important is that digital object is possible to be inside a collection. So it's possible to collect metadata, and what is also the main things is that every digital object has their identifier. This identifier has to be persistent, and also digital object is accessible with some interface, and we have some services which is possible to use, for example, read a digital object, execute this in digital object, etc. Please, if we go to the next slide. Important is that we connect these digital objects which has PIDs between. For example, on first in A we have linkage of different versions of software, data sets in a repository, or digital objects of one research object, for example, software, lab notebook, etc. Maybe if we go to the next slide. In first EOSC interoperability framework in 2021, we have done EOSC minimum metadata set recommendation for metadata interoperability. It is, how I say, evolution of RDA metadata set recommendation with additional metadata and with additional classes. And also what is important, we have some core metadata elements, for example, for every digital object, and we have different digital objects for different types of, we have different metadata for digital objects from different types of digital object, and also, for example, for data or services, we have domain-specific metadata, and also cross-domain specific metadata. On chat, on the notes, you have link. The same link is also on the EOSC minimum metadata set recommendation title, if you want to see more about this. Please, if you go to the next slide. What is also important? Machine actionable digital object. So machines and humans has possibilities to use this digital object. We have machine readable, machine interpretable, and machine actionable digital object. In machine actionable digital object, we also add some types of operations which is possible to use on a digital object. And if you will have time, please visit FAIR Digital Object Forum and specifications. And also I put a link for FAIR Digital Object technical overview. This is all from my side.
Great, thank you. I think this is on to Claire next.
Thank you for that, Milan. It's a great segue into the next section on machine actionable DMPs. So before I get into that, the RDA developed a consensus international standard for machine actionable data management plans that was released a few years ago. And following that, we created an MADMP working group, not within the RDA, outside of the RDA, because as you very clearly pointed out, Milan, there are so many other things that we need to track. And so we been working for the last more than a couple years on creating an extension to the existing RDA standard. And of course, our rule number one is don't break the RDA standard. So the RDA standard is the core of this extension. And then we've added on a considerable number of additional modules. We have both the machine readable actionable JSON file and the human readable specification. And then Lauren, could you put in the chat, I wasn't able to do that, a chat to the first link, and people who like to multitask can go explore while I'm talking. The RDA working group is in maintenance mode, and there are some issues that they're working on, and our goal is that some, if not all, of the additional, attributes, information we're collecting in this extension would be pulled into the RDA standard eventually. So this is a metadata application profile, structure, controlled vocabularies, and no redundancies. And in the broader context, it really operationalizes fairer data management principles, fair plus ethical plus reproducible. And the MADMP is really the engine for collecting information about the project and its data. A lot of it overlaps what Milan was talking about earlier. And then the idea is that it's not a one-time thing at the beginning of a project, but it is continuously updated throughout the data lifecycle. And what we are aiming for is a discipline agnostic. We want to get away from discipline specific MADMPs or DMPs and really have it discipline agnostic so that we have much greater interoperability and common understanding. And so we try and minimize to the greatest extent possible the number of mandatory fields or questions. There are about 30 that are required or mandatory. Then we have a large number of optional questions, which during implementation in a particular organization or program, then the organization, the program can choose to make some optional fields mandatory for their implementation. And before I leave the slide, since this is a working group that is outside of the RDA, if anybody is, we invite you and we'll a warm welcome to anybody who would like to join this working group to continue work on the extension. My email address is there on the right. Next slide, please. So if you do click on, I won't ask you to jump to the other tabs, but if people do click on that link in the chat, you will see the conceptual model, the overall conceptual model, and on that page at the beginning there is a user-friendly, easy-to-read preamble. At the top, and if you scroll down much further, you will see the actual specification and the formal format. And in the top right, if you click on I forget what it's called, the blue link at the top right, you'll see a high-level briefing. So high-level briefing, and you can go in there and see some very user-friendly, for executives, friendly language to describe exactly what it is. So in addition to the information that really does need to be recorded in the DMP, we also have built in links to connect to information that exists outside of the DMP. The idea is not to stuff all the information from everywhere and stuff it all into the MADMP. Quite the contrary. If it exists outside of the MADMP, for example, software management plan, well, not to copy all that information all over again into the DMP, but simply provide a link to it. And then I will just end perhaps with the remark that we've tried as much as possible to make sure that this extension, this standard, aligns also with CARE principles, OCAP, and others, and other standards as much as possible. So we think that we just released version 2.5 last week. Less than a week ago, last Friday. And we think this is the first, really, the first version that we've released that is really now ready for in-depth testing for implementation. So again, if there is anybody who would be interested in working with us on that testing phase, implementation testing, please send me an email. We'd be more than happy to work with you and to integrate you in the group. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you, Claire. So I just wanted to bring up the topic of verifying reproducibility or reproducibility verification. There are efforts around that topic that we are seeing popping up both by publishers, journals, some institutions, societies, as well as third-party groups who are offering that as a service. So it's interesting in the context of metadata, and the question that came up before, like what is it that we want to describe? Here, the question that we're asking to describe is a result reproducible? If you use the same analysis steps, the same data, are you getting the same results? And the metadata applies to that question. So rather than, or in addition to metadata that you might need, or we're recommending that you would have on data, code, software, computational environment, all of those things that we ran through before, in addition to that, we want to know, we want metadata that would indicate to us the level or the aspect of reproducibility that has been verified. So this applies to a project or a study level. Another way to think about it is that it applies to a scientific claim, right? So we want to see is a scientific claim, can it be reproduced with this particular data and this particular code? So there's a lot of questions that come up. Who should verify? When do they verify? Is it good to verify immediately, but immediately after a claim has been reported, and but before it was officially published, or should you do it after it was published? How to document it? What does it actually mean that something has been verified? So I think it brings up a set of interesting questions, and I just wanted to kind of do a quick tour of some people who've been thinking about it in different ways. Sometimes not necessarily in using the context of metadata, but applying to verification or giving a certification that something has been reproduced. So the top guidelines, I'll start there for a minute on the bottom left of the screen. This is something that's been in existence since for about 10 years now, since 2015. And it was created by journals and funders and societies, starting out with the social sciences, but not only. And the idea is let's align our scientific ideals with practices. So they have, I think, 8 standards and 3 levels of increasing stringency, as they say. So you can comply with these standards at 3 different levels. And there is level 3, which is the highest, is the desirable one, or the one that would apply to this question of, is this reproducible? And they're applying that to the standards that they have on data, on materials, and on code transparency. So there's journals who subscribe to the top guidelines, and they get ranked, or they rate themselves on where they are, their policies, in terms of their stringency. So that's one example. The IEEE has these 2 standards. Is the code available, and is it reviewed? And I highlighted in a little red box there that by code reviewed, they mean that it produces the described outputs when it is run. It can support the reproducibility of the published results. So the IEEE will publish articles, and they can earn a reproducibility badge. So it helps, with credibility, with visibility, and it appears in the Explorer Digital Library. Similarly, ACM, who really has been working on this for a long time, has their badges and artifact review processes. And these badges have various degrees of review or approval, anywhere from, you know, the artifact is even available, all the fact to it's reproduced and then replicated. So they will also publish these labels in their ACM digital library. The American Economics Association has, for all of its journals, has data and code availability policies since about, I think, 2019, maybe 2018. And it endorses the DCAS standards and makes their policy compatible. So they have a data editor who assesses compliance with the policy, and they will conduct reproducibility checks before publishing any article in their journals. And finally, I just want to point out, well, let's talk about Cornell Center for Social Science real quick, because they are one of those organizations that both applies the process internally toward, by choice, researchers can choose to come to, in this case, the Cornell Center for Social Science and have their work reproduced and certified. And then it'll appear that way as certified in their own library, but they will also offer that service to journals as a third party, in this case, the American Journal of Political Science. And so that statement appears at the top of the article within the journal. Is it metadata? Not in the machine actionable way, maybe that we think about it, but the statement does appear. And finally, I just want to mention my own institution, the Institution for Social and Policy Studies, that we follow also a similar process to what Cornell is doing. And anything that is published in our data archive has been reproduced and verified as such. We only have a field that we're calling review type. And if it's a full review, then that means that, you know, we were able to reproduce it, and we will note the time when it was reproduced. And we will also, by the way, also publish alongside it any comments as what we call a curator README of any issues that came up in the process of trying to reproduce and run the code. So those are some interesting, I think, developments on the topic of verifying reproducibility. I also just wanted to mention that there's checklists being worked on in this space. Claire mentioned the FAIR checklist, as well as other groups who are working, and that's part of what the reproducibility interest group is trying to do, is kind of be aware of these different efforts that are going on, and maybe trying to, I don't know, coordinate might be a very strong word here, but at least make visible to the community these efforts that are going on around these issues. So that's all I have on verifying reproducibility. I think we're sort of moving to our final phase, which is really opening it up to discussion. Alex, I think I'll hand it over to you with looking at what issues maybe came up, what do we want to emphasize, and opening it up to the community.
Okay. Well, first of all, does anybody have any immediate reaction to the talks that we've just had? Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and jump in. Wow, have we impressed you all to a stunned silence? Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to share experience that we had in our team. We are a research and development team. And when it was mentioned in the reproducibility slide, who is supposed to verify reproducibility, I would say that it's kind of a nice practice when there is like an internal verification. We have this experience in our group that we were running multiple approaches, all of them with the same aim. And we had different people working on each repository. And at some point, it became messy. Everyone was running the things in a different way. And we said, like, no, it's not possible. We will not read the full documentation of each one if all of them are supposed to do the same task, just with a different library, different approach. So we did like a harmonization of all the repositories, and we created a Docker to run them all. And we had like reproducibility verification runs. It wasn't machine learning, so it didn't give us exactly the same, for instance, precision. It was changing on the 5th decimal digit, but we did it, and it was actually very useful internally for us. So I kind of think that maybe when groups also realize that reproducibility is not for others, but for your own team, for yourself, because it makes your life easier, then we will get into a point that will be interesting, because the community will start pushing the community to make more reproducible research and more reproducible code.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very important point.
I'll just agree 100%. I think that the earlier people are doing that, the better. The fact that publishers are now interested in reproducibility because they are requiring these materials and they're providing storage in some cases. So of course they want to make sure that they are both supporting the claims, the scientific claims, but also not storing and stewarding material that is not it. It makes sense that publishers would care, but I would think that publishers would be happy if they can get the materials from the beginning with some kind of certification that it's reproducible, and the onus wouldn't be on them at the end of the process to go ahead and do these kind of checks. So I agree with you 100%. It's the same point that people make often, that you have to start thinking about FAIR from the very beginning. It falls in that same kind of logic. We need to think about being reproducible from the beginning.
I'll just chime in and kind of agree with what Limon said. The viewpoint of a publisher, would be great if this all happened upstream. It's really difficult and kind of time consuming often to do it at the point of publication, right? It's when researchers are often up against the time pressure to get something out, and then it's hard to then sometimes ask them to go back, and if they haven't been practicing their data management very well, it's onerous on them to get things done, and then often they'll just go publish somewhere else. That's an easier route. But having some kind of reproducibility verification up front, also helps massively in terms of things like ethics, kind of cases which then publishers have to deal with, and now publishers are seeing a huge amount of kind of ethics work coming up as well, and that would really help mitigate some of that work, and a lot of it is simple kind of mistakes that researchers made, and that could be picked up earlier in the kind of system if reproducibility verification is done.
Maybe I could just jump in. I so agree with the comments that have been made thus far. I think I mean, the stick is really important. So the publishers as a stick, I think that's important, but we need to get this more upstream, and really the two big issues are, number one, students need to be trained in this at the outset. This has to be built into our programs in the undergrad level and the graduate level, so that when people come into the workplace and start publishing on their own, they take this for granted. Of course, what's going to happen if they get this wonderful training and they take it all for granted and they get into the workplace, they may be shocked to discover that they don't have the time, the funding, the capacity to do it, because the fact is, it is much more, it's very time consuming to achieve this in a publish and perish world. So there needs to be a normalization much, much, much further upstream of reproducibility, and so that we get to the stage where people will be shocked if this work hasn't been done. We're not there yet, so it's still the carrot and the stick. It's a challenge from, as has been said earlier in different ways. It's a big challenge.
So I'm hearing a lot of support around the idea of kind of tackling the social issues first, about getting people upskilled so that they're more aware of the issues of how they make their code and their data results reproducible. Do we have anyone who wants to speak up on the technical side to see if research can be supported through the use of easily used metadata standards or minimum information checklists? Hi, Hugh. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, so this is very, very speculative, and better actual software engineers on this call can feel free to say you're talking nonsense, Shanahan. But it seems to me that there's a link here in terms of, when you talk with software engineers and when they're actually doing stuff, the thing they're all the time doing is testing their code as they go along, building unit tests and stuff like that. And once you actually get that sort of perspective in mind, then you start to say, well, it's more efficient and so on. And if there are ways of saying that as well, your unit testing is part of the generating the metadata, then that's a kind of a training. That's something that what Claire was saying about in terms of getting early career researchers to get the thing. That's the thing that we not only teach them, or Python or whatever, that we say to them, yeah, you also need to know how to do, unit testing and things like this, and getting into that perspective there. Okay.
Thanks. Jael?
Yes, I think aligned to what just Hugh said and what he put in the chat. I would like to mention the software management plans. It's something that has been getting some attention. I have had the chance to work on this subject with Elixir and also with the German National Research Data Infrastructures. And we even have like a matching actionable software management plan that we are working on it. And something that it is, sorry, very important in there for reproducibility, for instance, is requesting sample data. Give me a sample data. You don't have to give me the whole data set if it is too big or if it is too difficult, but some sample data that I can use as input for your code, and also give me the output data that I am supposed to get if I use your sample input data and your code. I want to get to the same result. So this is something, for instance, that the software management plans are considering already. And I think it goes in the direction of reproducibility. And they are baby steps. It's not that you give me the sample data, you give me the output data, And there you go, you are totally reproducibility. No, you also have to give me the open source code, the right license for me to rerun it, some instructions, minimal instructions, but it is those are efforts that are going in this direction.
Can I just jump in real quick on the sample data idea, which I like a lot? I think it also, exactly, it also figures in with the sensitive data. So that is restricted access to data is a problem for reproducibility, as was mentioned. I think some strategies that have been tried are, sample mass data. I think simulated data is another one. I know, sorry, I keep bringing the AEA. I'm not an economist, but I am a social scientist and I work a lot with them. So it's on top of my mind. But one thing they've instituted is an agreement, a way to for the AEA to receive the same access to the data that the researcher did. So if a researcher gets permission, license, whatever, to use restricted data in some way that they have set up, the journal can also get that for the purpose of reproducing the results. So it's a tricky situation, but I think that there are some ways around getting around that. I personally think simulated data is an interesting one. This is obviously not data reproducibility per se, but if we want to be able to reproduce results, at least see if the code runs, if the software works, that's an interesting one.
Mathieu, would you like to
Yeah,
unmute?
as an economist, maybe I can jump in here. Well, from what I know, a lot of people, when they have confidential, sensitive data, either they can have a third independent party that validates the work, or they can provide to the journals either an excerpt of the data, but it means that you have to make sure that the journal can have access to it, and it raises a lot of questions about, for instance, licensing and things like that. It's not that easy. So what I experienced with other people, because I couldn't publish in the AER, it's just big journals, and I failed at that. But anyway, they also run fake data sets and check that the code runs in synthetic. It's kind of synthetic control. I think it's the name they give. So that's what synthetic data, as I see in the chat. So yes, that's one way to put it. But it doesn't necessarily resolve everything. And also, listening to everybody, I wanted to maybe input something else. We are having in mind a published paper at the end of the publication process, checking data when it's well advanced in the publication process, which raises a lot of questions. What I was thinking was where we see an increase in response to replicability, reproducibility crisis of registered reports and things like that. And when they write a registered report, often researchers are actually already using the data from pilot studies and so on. So they already have the code that will be used in the end after they collected the data, so that they run the things that they registered. And this could be, the timeline could be an opportunity to check the code in advance when it's not already run on the real data. And I think this should be maybe thought about in the group discussions.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. So yeah, I think we've got a kind of broad agreement there on the use of a kind of unit testing methodology of having input and output sample data that can be used to test the methodology and making sure that it's working as expected. I see we're starting to run out of time. Does anyone have any last points that they'd like to raise before we start wrapping up? If not, if I could ask for the slides to come back up. So if we can go back and one more. I've tried to put down on the slides some points and they're not appearing, so I don't know what's happened there.
Not seeing them, hang on. Here we go. There we go.
Yes, there we are. So I've tried to keep track of some of the things that we've been talking about. And I think what's come out of the discussion is a recognition that it's a big issue with a lot of different dependent parts to it. A lot of this is going to depend on particular contexts, and really, yeah, it's too big to tackle all at once. So we need to find a suitable starting point. And so we had suggestions about concentrating on particular types of code or environment to concentrate on in the beginning, or do we start looking at particular domains? Do we sort of go back to sort of first principles and look at the foundational building blocks to reproducibility, the kind of good data hygiene and code hygiene that's needed in order to get things into a reproducible state? And we've had several suggestions of avenues that we can explore for whether we should be looking at the information that is necessary to provide to people so that they can reproduce results using the code and data provided, whether that is in the form of a formalized metadata scheme with element lists and ontologies, whether it's a simpler kind of minimum information checklist. But I think I'm gathering from the mood in the room that that is perhaps a little bit further down the road, and we should be thinking at a sort of more foundational level, looking at the advice and recommendations that we can be giving to researchers for techniques and approaches that they can use. So I'm seeing more enthusiasm for things like for training on best practice or recommendations for sort of best practices about researchers being able to validate their own code for reproducibility, and then maybe having a different and a slightly different focus thing for data repositories to be able to test reproducibility, and similarly for journal reviewers to be able to do so. So I think this has given us all a lot to think about. We'd love to continue the discussion after the session. So if we go on to the final slide, there's a link there to a Google form, and we would love it if you would go to that. It really will not take you very long to do. It's something like 4 questions, one of which is your email address. So it will not take you very long at all to do this, and just to register your interest and see whether or not you want to continue this conversation, and to kind of vote for an approach that we might be able to take forward within the RDA. So there are a few suggestions that are already there. There's a a space for you to make a suggestion for a different approach, and we'll take the results of that and see what next steps and whether or not there is scope there to either conduct another birds of a feather session at a future plenary, or if there's a lot of enthusiasm, to actually set up a working group to actually tackle this. So thank you all very much for your contributions. I will try and make sure that we save some of the comments from the chat and get them into the collaborative notes if they're not already there, so that we don't lose those. But I think we are now at time. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Alex, thank you for
everybody.
that wonderful summary. And thanks to
Right.
everyone for collaborative notes.
All right. Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
great day.
Thanks very much. Do we have the notes saved?
I've saved the chat, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.